Now, you can see that I've skipped some of the timeline. He was writing in 1927. This is 1950 to 1952. Here's what happens. War ends 1945. Japan surrenders. During the World War, the civil war that's been going on in China between the Revolutionary Party and the party that's in power, that has been going on, this civil war, it's really suspended during World War II. And then what happens is World War II ends, the Civil War begins again, and that's when revolution is swept in China with the help of Stalin. Okay? Great what if history question. What if there had never been the World War II in the intervening years? Would China have undergone a revolutionary period sooner? Or would there have been no revolution at all because the time wasn't ripe before World War II? Historians argue about that. But it swept in 1949. China becomes a communist nation with Mao at the head. And one of the questions that we asked on your reading guide is, would you have wanted to be under the justice system of the People's Peasants' Courts? Okay. Probably not. No rule of law, no protection of private property. So that's one way that Mao handled the peasant problem. Remember, Stalin had the kulak problem and he liquidated them. And if you think about Chinese culture for a minute, it's intergenerational. If you go out into the rural areas, you have great-grandfathers, grandfathers, parents, children all living together and working the same land for generations. The Communist Party comes in and says, you have to give up your land, we're collectivizing. So there's a lot of resistance. Okay? And so what Mao and the revolutionaries did is way back into the 1920s, they went out into these areas, they revolutionized and radicalized portions of the peasant population. They maintained power. They gained power in the outlying areas, had the People's Court. You can see they have weaponry, and then it was their job to bring about the abolition of private property and get their peasant neighbors to either give up their property and be collectivized or experience the People's Court's justice or be killed. Okay? Remember, Mao was talking about, is it too far? Nothing's too far, okay, in order to achieve the revolution. It's a moral imperative. Okay? The ends justify the means. Second thing that happened in terms of just massive death, Mao implemented what he thought was a radical move toward modernization and rapid bringing about of collectivizing the farms at disastrous levels. He thought it was essential that they be modernized as quickly as possible. He called this program the Great Leap Forward. Okay? Basically confiscating land, confiscating private property, making all of the peasants work for the state. A lot of them refused and were killed, but disastrous consequences for food production. Okay? Unnatural deaths under Mao due to just starvation, similar to what you saw in the case with Stalin in Russia. When they were collectivizing the farms, productivity dropped dramatically and the people had nothing to eat. Nothing to eat. Okay. And like Stalin, Mao engaged in purges, arresting those he saw as traitors to the revolution. A whole generation of Chinese Solzhenitsyns were arrested and put into prison. All right, and so prison camps, all of this together leads to this level of just inexplicable, unimaginable, unnatural death brought in by a leader under the banner of Marxist ideas. That's the legacy. Okay? It's still the People's Republic of China today. It's still a communist nation today. Okay? We trade with China. not so much as we used to. Okay. They've adopted for their own ends a lot of economic liberty ideas in terms of for utility only. Okay. So they allow trade with capitalist nations. With the election of Xi Jinping, really young Chinese premier, he was just re-elected, I believe, a year ago, and he's been implementing a return to a lot of communist orthodoxy in how they're running China. Okay. We lose sight of that because we trade so much with them. There's open borders in terms of people being able to visit China, do business with China, okay, go to school in China. But what you're seeing as the communist ideas are being elevated and put back into place in a pure form under Premier Xi, you're seeing a closing of that. Dissidents are arrested and put into jail. Okay. If you follow the Chinese military, one of the things that I really didn't put with Stalin, but during the 50s, during the Cold War, what you see is rapid military buildup under both Stalin and Mao to the detriment of the people. Okay, so China is the number 2, number 3 military power in the world. And if you look forward in terms of challenges to American foreign policy, Russia and China, both former or existing communist countries, are the major threat that we look at from a military perspective. Okay. All right, so parallels with Stalin, same ideology, still in place. There was a crackdown in China within the last month on home churches, the Christian church. So trying to get rid of the influence of religion. Okay. There was an opening, and now they're tightening that back up.